In the UK, when renting a property to three unrelated persons, you must have an HMO license. An HMO means is a house of multiple occupation. So if the similar property were occupied by a family, a lot of these regulations would not apply. So what are the regulations? And I'll go through those. These are similar for England, Scotland and Wales, but there are minor variations depending on the location. So now what we'll do is go through a number of these regulations and show you what is required. So starting from the main door or the main entrance of the house, doors, external doors must have a door closer on them. So if the door is left open and let go, it should close and latch by itself. In addition to that, there must be an additional lock, a thumb lock, for added security. And this must be a thumb lock. There mustn't be a key for this lock, for the secondary lock, and the other internal lock also must be a thumb lock, not a key lock. Moving further up, if there is not enough internal lighting, as in this flat, there is no window to the stairwell, then you must have emergency lighting. And for this you'll need to renew a certificate every year to prove that this lighting works, that the battery is in order. Next, we must have a fire extinguisher in the house. This one has to be tested every year to make sure it is fully charged. And you can't just make a visual inspection, you have to go to a fire protection engineer perhaps, and they will give you a certificate for this appliance. Now moving on to the bathroom, if your bathroom has an external window, it must be in working order, and there should be external ventilation via an extractor fan as well. The lighting in the bathroom must be compliant, I think it's IR65, so therefore moisture cannot enter the light fitting. Now moving on to a typical bedroom, we must check the windows first, and they must be able to be easily opened. Oops, we need two hands for to open that window, but that window does open, but it must be easily opened with two hands, and it must be able to hold itself as well. Each bedroom should also have 6 power points. In this case there's 2 here, 2 behind the bed, and there's 2 behind the wardrobe. But as I said, it must have 6 power points. If you're supplying furnishings, then the furnishings must have the fire retardant label on each item. Now regarding doors. Now the doors must be FD30 compliant, which means they must be fire resistant for up to 30 minutes. And they must also have smoke strips on them. Now smoke strips are these here, and these are routed into the side of the door along the top and also on the back of the door, not along the bottom. Now there are 2 types of door strips, intermittent door strips. You can get these ones which are routed into the door and which may cost a little extra to install when fitting the door, but is well worth it because they have a longer life. Now there is an alternative to that, and that is a stick-on strip, like so. And this literally just sticks on to the door frame, but it has the same effect. And here in case we have actually got both, but you only need one. So you can either put on the stick-on door strip, or you can put on this other type of intermittent strip as well. Now, as you probably noticed, there are door closers on every door. And as I showed earlier with the main door, when let go, the door must latch. And it must latch on, obviously, to the door latch. So therefore, when pulled without turning the door handle, it cannot open. Now moving on to the kitchen and the living area, each appliance must have a PAT test every year. Now PAT stands for Personal
Appliance
Test. So each item, as in the fridge, freezer, the microwave, any items that you supply must have this test, and you will get a compliance certificate every year. Now, as the rules have evolved over the years, initially when HMO regulations first came in, there was only one smoke alarm required in the hallway. But as the years have gone by, you now require a smoke alarm in every single room as well as the hallway, and in the kitchen area you need a heat detecting system as well as a smoke alarm, and that's what we're looking at now. And that certificate must be renewed every single year. Now before we get to the cost, I want to make a few additional points. In addition to a fire extinguisher, you'll also need a fire blanket, and that's usually positioned inside the kitchen, obviously. And regarding FD30 doors, you don't have to actually replace all the doors. You can actually retrofit the doors with plasterboard to make them FD30 compliant, or you can actually paint them with a fire retardant paint as well. Now, with the rest of the house, with the rest of the bedrooms, you have to have 6 power points, and that's the same with the kitchen area as well. You also need 6 power points in the kitchen area, and it's probably better to future-proof things by putting in an extra couple power points as well. Now, in terms of PAT testing, although I said everything has to be PAT tested, that's every second-hand item. If you bought a brand new item, that doesn't need to be PAT tested for 12 months. So because you'll have the receipt of the item, so therefore you can prove that it's a brand new product, so therefore it doesn't have to have a PAT test, because every item will be separately billed by the company that does it. Now, in terms of smoke and heat detectors, these must be hardwired as well. They can't just be battery operated, they have to be hardwired, and a battery backup is required. And that goes for the emergency lighting as well. The battery in the emergency light actually has to last for 3 hours. Now, I've never had an engineer wait here for 3 hours to test it, so how they do that I don't know, but that's what the legislation specifies. With the application, you have to hand in certain certification, starting with the gas certificate for the gas boiler, which has to be serviced every year. Then there is a current electrical installation condition report, which is a certificate which lasts for between 3 and 5 years, which is an assessment of the electrical circuit in the flat or the property. Then there is, of course, the annual emergency lighting certificate, which may or may not be required, the PAT test certificate, the fire appliance test for the fire extinguisher. Then there is the fire alarm certificate for the smoke alarms and the heat detectors. Then there is a sprinkler certificate. This may or may not be required. And then there is a fire assessment certificate, which a document like this can be downloaded from the web and filled in appropriately. And finally, an A4 size of the floor plan. And this you can draw up yourself as long as it's relatively neat and tidy. It doesn't have to be precisely to scale, but as long as it's an approximation. Now, in terms of cost, the apartment that we've just had the tour around is a 3-bedroom apartment with a kitchen, living room, bathroom and a storage cupboard. Altogether roughly 70 square meters. And this cost to make it HMO compliant around £3,000. Now, as I said, we replaced all the doors because it was a refurbishment, but you don't have to replace all the doors, and by doing so you save at least £1,000 off that. And so the cost can be reduced, but a lot of companies try to make out as though it's very hard to make an apartment HMO compliant, and the fact of the matter is it's not really. It's very straightforward, and if you do a lot of the work yourself, you can reduce the cost even further. So I hope this video has shed some light on what's required to make an apartment HMO compliant and some of the regulations. But as I said earlier, the legislation differs from local authority to local authority, and you should check with your local authority what is required in that particular area. But overall, as a general view, use the video as a reference. Thanks very much. And if you've actually learned anything from this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks very much.